Questions from the audience? Hold on, we got our first kid question. It's probably going to be the best one of the night. Did you raise your hand?
No, I just gave the thumbs
Oh, it's just a thumbs up. But he's listening because he gave a thumbs up.
Kids get bored with water, and so do adults. Are there any non-water beverages that you would encourage, and what are ones that maybe advertise in such a way that you would think they would be good, but you would probably discourage?
So I actually discussed this with Joey on Sunday when we were talking. So when I was in high school, I mean, really as long as I can remember, as long as I've been an athlete, and I think it's gotten worse and worse as I've gotten older, Gatorade is something that people are drinking all the time, and it was not created for that. And it's something that, you know, Gatorade is very good, and it serves a purpose, and it's good during certain activities, and it does provide the electrolytes and the sugar that you need. But I think going to beverages like that on a regular basis can be dangerous. It's a lot of sugar. And that alone, that and the salt content will affect hydration status. So I think if you can get, you know, kids, athletes, yourselves in the office, no matter what, if you can kind of match it with the water, I found that that's, you know, some of my friends that have asked that kind of advice, if they have a Gatorade, I'm like, if you can drink a bottle of water of the same size, or refill it and then drink the water, if they can kind of match it with water and it not always be a sugary beverage, or, I mean, a soda is essentially the carbonated version of a Gatorade if you are thinking about sugar content. So I think, you know, if someone doesn't like water though, and they can have Crystal Light or different things like that every now and then, you know, those drinks are going to be a little bit better because you're not getting 40 grams of sugar in it. But I think the matching method can sometimes help, like have a little bit of water, and then if something needs to be flavored, that, you know, that can be a good approach to take.
There's also, although I'm sitting next to you, I want to talk to the mic so everybody can hear me. Just one thing that I do, if you're familiar with the Nuun tablets, it's N-U-U-N. You can get them at Dick's Sporting Goods Academy. You can get them at the Track Shack in Homewood. It's a small electrolyte tablet, and when I'm drinking 32 ounces of water, I'll just drop one in my water and sip on that kind of throughout the day. Or make sure that I have that before lunch and then do another one in the evening. But they come in flavors, so you can get watermelon flavor, all that, and it's electrolyte. It doesn't have a ton of sugar.
Whatever you can do to up your hydration status, because I think that's a major concern with most of us. Just like Brandon said, I mean, most of us sitting here right now are probably dehydrated. So a tablet or a Crystal Light or something like that, those packets, keeping them in your desk or something, if that's going to make you drink more water, hey, that's great. It's just the really heavy sugary drinks, those are the ones to at least try to minimize. So
we have not a question, but a tip from an audience member.
So I was really bad at hydrating, and it didn't matter if I had a cool bottle or anything like that. I drink out of a plain Gatorade bottle, and I always have it with me, but I have an app on my phone that notifies me, and there are plenty like it, but I literally have set times throughout the day, including one synced up with my alarm when I wake up to drink, and I mark it off. And if I don't drink during that time, the app will keep nagging me to get it done. So it's really helpful to download a phone app for it.
I wonder if they make a wine app. That would be really cool.
That was fun.
You can stay up there.
Okay.
I got a question. Talk about being dehydrated, and most of us are dehydrated. How do you tell? How would you know if you're dehydrated?
Look at your urine.
There you go. There you go.
What color are we looking for? What color are we looking for?
Close to clear.
I recommend clear to light lemonade color. It's gross to some people, but honestly, it's one of the best ways to do it.
Okay.
And if you're really unsure, there's a great scale that you can Google, and it gives you a nice progression of the shades of yellow and what you should see. So, and then if you know if you're particularly dark or you're a little unsure, when in doubt, drink more water. Always.
The urine test, it always comes down to that.
Great question.
I have a problem like when he tried to use in the school, he started drinking it, but now he wants the mineral water and he loves it and he can drink a lot. Much more, like if I give him like regular water, like mineral water with no flavor, a lot. And also I have a question, because I read a lot of like articles about that we shouldn't drink when we eat, we should drink between meals. So what is it true? Because like if we drink when we eat, that it slow down digestion, or it can mess up. For example, I have a hard time with my digestion because if I work out, I usually eat a lot. So I was trying to find out like what is like, how can I help myself? So should I drink when I eat, or I should stop drinking before? What I read was 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after, that I don't mess up my digestion. I don't know if you understand
It's a good question, and that's kind of the fine tuning, but I also think that's also goes back to the individual. So for someone like you, if you do have a hard time, drinking while eating a meal, it's best to try your best to go into that meal well hydrated, and you don't have to worry about, drinking while you eat. And then maybe 10, 15 minutes after you're done with that meal, resume your normal water or hydration. For some people, it will not bother them at all, and they can tolerate it just fine. But if it's individual, like you said, with you personally, then I would do it, maybe stop consuming fluids 20 minutes before the meal to make sure they have time to clear your stomach, and then eat your meal, and then resume maybe another 20, 30 minutes after.
Yes, Karen.
This is for the boys, just because the boys will probably find it more interesting. You can also check your hydration, girls too, but you'll probably think it's gross. You can also check your hydration by your stool. There is a chart you can all Google. It's called the Bristol.
That means your food, not what you're sitting down.
Anywho, it's Bristol, B-R-I-S-T-O-L. Bristol stool chart. I actually gave it to Joey for Christmas.
That's my wife, so we're really close.
And every time you go to the bathroom, check the color of your urine, but also check what your poo looks like. And if it's tadpole poop, then you need water. You're welcome, parents. They're going to be obsessed with their poop.
Our kids are working very heavily about soda companies, Gatorade, and necessity. So our daughter plays 6 hours of volleyball in the tournament. When is Gatorade proper to eat? When would you recommend?
Everybody defers to Brandon.
No. The marketing is a tough battle, because you'll battle it between supplements and sport drinks and everything else, but I just try to educate the athletes that it's not meant to be drank like water. You're not supposed to drink it throughout the day, and I tell them about the purpose. The purpose is usually roughly, maybe an hour leading up to sport, during sports, and maybe immediately after sports, especially if we're talking back-to-back games, doubleheaders, things like that. But for them to be sipping on while they're just watching TV throughout the day, that's not its purpose. Drinking it like Kool-Aid or just whenever, that's not the goal of it. Now, also on the flip side, if you have an athlete that you're trying to add weight to, and they're very active, then that's probably not going to hurt them. Is it a good habit for them to get into? No, especially if they're not going to continue sports down the line. That's a lot of empty calories they don't need. But generally, an hour or two leading up to training or exercise or competition, during competition, and then immediately after that, switch to water, or have them alternate, as they were referring to earlier, Gatorade water. I have a lot of athletes do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, just with thinking about when is exercise taking place. Those long tournaments, those are the times for Gatorade and water, but those are the times for Gatorade, not I'm just going to take it in my book bag to school with my lunch, or kids who, that's what I see a lot, is at least when I was in high school, you could buy Gatorade and whatever, and some of my friends would drink 2 or 3 throughout the day, and that's just not the place. So just think about exercise and around those times with the recommendations that Brandon just gave. That's the best way to think about
And
it.
ask them to refer back to the commercials. Ask them if they saw in the commercial the kid played a video game while drinking Gatorade.
Right.
No, they're usually active in the sport, and there's your answer.
John, we'll go one more question and then we're going to move to the next one.
Is there a need to increase electrolyte intake before competition, or is it meant to replenish after?
So typically the use for those drinks, it's going to be replenishment after, and I think that's just during or after.
Right.
So while losing, before, I don't think, ideally you would have your pre-competition or practice or whatever, you would have a normal meal. You should have a normal meal or snack or something like that. So really there shouldn't be deficits going in. So if an individual is eating properly beforehand, whatever that timing is, a couple hours before or depending on the activity, there shouldn't be any concern for that. But these drinks are mostly the during, after, how much you're losing, depending on what the activity is, the intensity, the duration.
All right, we're going to move to the next thing. This one was really hot with everybody that I talked to. This has to do with your weight and your performance and how the perception of weight affects performance in athletes. And I'm going to start with Amy on this one because she and I talked about this quite a bit, just what she sees clinically and deals with adult athletes a lot as well. But it's a lot of it is a lack of calories, caloric intake, and what that starts to do to an athlete, the effects, and then especially to female athletes that aren't getting enough calories. So, Amy, if you want to kind of kick this one off and just what it can do, and maybe not even so much from a performance standpoint, but just a general health standpoint, what the reduction of calories can start doing to somebody.
Yeah, I think so. On a professional basis, as an endocrinologist, I unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you think about it, see the extremes. And so it's not uncommon for younger girls, in my mind, but 18-year-old, 19-year-old girls to come into clinic who never had a menstrual cycle or had one at age 13, 14, and then never again. And frequently that is related to improper nutrition or overtraining, which leads to changes in the hormone communication between the master gland in the brain and the rest of our glands in our body. And so it presents with this change in menstrual cycles, but there are frequently a lot of other hormonal changes that are going on that are unrecognized. And it's not just a problem in that the menstrual cycles are not there, but it can lead to long-term problems as well, bone health issues, issues with fertility down the road. And so I think from a hormone standpoint, that's what we see frequently, but in the world of obesity medicine, we see a lot of issues with just being comfortable with your body regardless of the shape. We're all shaped differently, and unfortunately, a lot of girls especially, but boys increasingly, are trying to attain a shape that not necessarily is achievable for them. And so I think being good examples, teaching body confidence is really important.
Brandon, I want to get to you. Actually, I want to get to just about everybody up here. But I know, Megan, you just got back from a conference in Orlando that talked about what Amy just said, body image. I know you went to a seminar while you were there that was called Body Image. Talk about some of the things that you all addressed in that seminar.
So it was about an hour seminar where they were presenting basically a program that they had done across 9 NCAA Division I institutions. So for collegiate athletes, I believe they had roughly 150 female athletes who came forward and volunteered to be in the program. Basically, the idea was starting this first year with addressing the not just societal and sociocultural ideas for how our bodies should look, but also the sport-related ideas for how our bodies should look. So for this sport, I need to be stronger. For this sport, I need to be leaner, things like that. And what they wanted to address was they sat down in several sessions with them, used even, because student athletes right now use social media so frequently and are really big on technology, they brought that into it as well. And it was more about awareness, about how things that we see in society, things that we see as far as if we're looking at extremely elite competitive athletes, looking at their body type doesn't necessarily mean that that's the body type we need in order to be successful. And overall, typically when student athletes see those things, they'll start to internalize them and then look at themselves and push, whether it's through eating, whether it's through exercise, themselves to get to that body type. And so basically they sat down in small groups at each institution and walked through not just the awareness side of it, but then how you can look at your body, male or female, and appreciate what you have. And then go through the right necessary steps to improve your body for performance, but one that's healthy for you as well. And they're in the first year of that. It's called Bodies in Motion. And it's pretty incredible, but across the board, the craziest thing that, and by crazy I mean, I think it would be surprising to a lot of people, is how predominant it is and has been shown to be in student athletes at the collegiate level, and then that trickles down as well, as far as looking at an ideal body shape, an ideal body athletically, and expecting that yours should be the same in order to achieve that same performance, that same elite kind of mentality.
Brandon, I know we were talking about some of the effects with female athletes, but we even talked about a lot of, whether it's football players or other sports, where a coach might say, go home and eat a rotisserie chicken so you can be heavier tomorrow so you can be stronger, is just as bad as saying, to a cross-country athlete, you need to lose 10 pounds so you can be faster. Those just don't correlate. I was wanting to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and anybody here, feel free to correct me. To my knowledge, I don't know of any literature showing if you're at this weight, you perform like this. And so I was talking to Joey, and I've actually got a client from Montgomery coming in. Her track coach, she's 150. Parents tell me she's muscle. Her track coach says, yeah, you're going to run faster at 135. There's no guarantee that. And we're also making a lot of assumptions. We have no idea what's going on with this athlete, how they're fueling, how they're sleeping, how they're taking care of themselves, or how they're training even. And so I was alluding to the fact that there's no guarantee that if you're this weight, you're going to do this. And plus, as coaches, as parents, as role models, the message you're sending can have long-term effects, whether it's male or female. We were talking about the football athlete, and a high school coach here in town that wanted their athlete to get bigger, really just to take up space. Because in high school, you don't have to be as talented, but you can take up space just by getting it bigger. So he said, hey, go home and eat chicken pot pie, whole pizza, milkshake, etc. And I was like, yes, you do have a bigger athlete, but you also have now a less efficient athlete, because now they've gained a whole bunch of fat, not necessarily muscle. Not only that, but now you have trained for the last year or 2 years this guy or girl to eat a certain way. They're going to take that with them after high school, after college, whatever it may be, or into college if they go that route. And so those are the eating habits and behaviors that that person has now developed, when there could have been an easier way to do it. Same thing with cross-country runners or track athletes. It could be, let's not so much worry about the weight aspect, as well as looking at the training, looking at the fueling, looking at the hydration, look at the sleep and all those other factors, and see if we can have them perform better. I had a gymnast coach who wanted an athlete to drop down 10, 15 pounds so she'd be more efficient on the bar. And I met with the coach privately and I asked, well, let's work together on this and see what happens. Well, the athlete wasn't good because she was a prime example of what we started off with, not eating breakfast, not eating lunch, having a bar, going into a 4-hour practice. Well, after working with me, she actually gained an extra 5 or 7 pounds, I believe it was, but she was performing immaculately. So the notion that the coach had in her head as far as getting an athlete down 10 or 15 pounds was actually quite opposite. So we increased her weight, and she was excelling in her sport. So you've got to be careful. There are no proven body types, ranges, weights that correlate with improved performance.
Carrie?
Yeah, and I'm talking, I guess, from a running perspective, because I think most 99% of people in here are runners, and especially half marathon and farther. I mean, most of the things I'm saying, there are literature out there that clearly says, you know, a lower body weight does translate to better performance, faster times. But I think one of the reasons I offer to my athletes twice a year a discounted price for a bod pod body fat percentage is I think that that's, you know, it's a little more cost prohibitive, but it's a much safer gauge for people that have their body fat percent. They can have a range that, you know, we're talking about safe ranges as opposed to weights, because as we know, body types and weights, that's just a terrible way to try to do that. So what do y'all think about using body fat as instead of weight? And what are the dangers of even that in trying to improve performance?
I think I'll comment just from a teenager perspective. If we're thinking about teenagers specifically, especially girls, thinking of the audience of parents in here, and the teens in the back, they have to have some fat for normal hormone production. And so we can't be excessively working towards fat reduction for younger persons. I think once you get post-production, reproductive age, if you're really training for purposes of faster speed and hormone production isn't necessarily your goal, then perhaps. But for younger persons, teenagers especially, they have to have some fat production for some fat on their body for normal steroid and hormone production.
And this is kind of to anybody on the panel that wants to jump in. We read an article, I guess it was in this past month's running journal, by Nancy Clark, who's a great sports dietitian. And she was talking about athletes, and she was talking about runners specifically, but I think this applies to any athlete. When we're talking about performance and wanting to perform better, and the weight issue, we're talking about if I just run for 500 more calories, or I eat 500 less calories each day by the end of the week, that adds up to 3,500 calories. That adds up to losing a pound. And you have these athletes, kids and adults both, that do that and then don't see it and wonder, what am I doing wrong? Should I now go from 2,000 to 1,500 calories? Or should I now go to 1,000 calories? And when you're not seeing it, you start that downward cycle. This is like my question, is what do you guys think about what athletes ought to do in order to, I don't know if this is a metabolism question, Amy, but what you do to try to reverse that trend of I'm not losing anything. And I guess there's also the question is why you're wanting to lose it anyways.
Well, I'll just say, because I think the rest of the panel probably has, the bodies frequently, we believe, have a set point of a weight that they want to maintain. And so it's not as simple as calories in versus calories out. There's a lot more from hormone changes and other changes in the body's mechanisms to adjust metabolism based on its own needs, where your weight is going to rest. And so you definitely can't assume if I eat this piece of cake, that's 1,000 calories and go and run for 2 hours, I'll burn it all off. Or if I have a negative balance of 3,500 calories for this weekend, I'll lose a pound, because that's not how it works. The body is going to adjust based on other mechanisms.
I think that's a really good point, because it's just so complicated. But we see these basic yes, 3,500 calories equals a pound. This is what you have to do. It's that simple, but it's not that simple. It's so complicated, and so many different things are going to be involved on what you're eating, what you're drinking, your sleeping patterns, and the set point theory. That's a really good point on that as well, because I've even found just in training over the years, all of my time as an athlete, different times where yes, I've tried to change my weight or focus on different things. There's one weight that my body absolutely will always go back to. And optimally, when I'm not thinking about it and not worrying about those things, that's where my body rests. It's happy there and it's fine. And I think if people just really get in tune with the nutrition side and everything from a well-rounded approach, the nutrition side, the hydration side, sleeping, everything. You know, your body really likes routine, and I think that helps you get more in tune with yourself, and then it's not this fixation on a number or I have to do this to lose this, because it's not an equation. There's just so much more involved. So really just, I think, finding a balance with yourself personally and everyone's going to be completely different.
And just, you know, coming from a psychological perspective, things take time. I mean, when you were saying X in, X out, I'm expecting a change immediately, and then when that change doesn't happen, now I'm going to push it to the extreme. Whether it's building up muscle, whether it is losing weight appropriately, training in a ways you're trying to improve numbers, stats, performance overall, it takes time. I can't tell you how many people I work with that it'll take us 6 months before we see the actual results that they wanted. Because the way that our bodies change, it takes time, and it takes making adjustments too. And patience has to come with that as well.
Anybody questions on weight, performance?
Well, I'll just add one thing, since she brought in the psychological aspect of it. Going back to like being, if you're in middle school, high school, college, and this idea of, so you're a parent, you have a child, they've decided they love this sport, they want to be good at it. Let's also look at the numbers about, are they going to be pros, or first are they going to go to college, or are they going to be pros? So you have to think about, are they trying to identify themselves just as an athlete, because we are so much more than that. I know this panel is about nutrition and athletics, but coming from the perspective of trying to drill down, I was a runner, so trying to drill down my weight to hit certain times. There's a reason why disordered eating happens to crop up in the sports that are specifically telling you you have to be a certain weight or a certain look to excel. If you want to make it in the top 1%, you have to look this way, you have to be this weight, whether it be super heavy or super thin. That's why I think, generally speaking, in America, we're a society of disordered eating, period, and thinking. And I think that if you teach your kids to be savvy about marketing, tell them to be a resistant reader or a resistant viewer to the things, all this noise. Tell them, listen to the people who care about you the most. And sometimes it may not be their coach, which is, you know, I'm not trying to bash coaches, but sometimes coaches have other ulterior motives besides just your child. So ask them, like, hey, you know, like, do you trust me? If you don't, let's go to somebody like Brandon. Let's go, you know, like, let's go to these people. Who do you trust? Don't listen to what the marketers are telling you, or even what people are saying about your body image and stuff, because, like she said, it takes time to find that, like, groundedness, and if you don't, eating disorders can crop up because it is wrapped around not just control, it's wrapped around identity, boundary issues, autonomy, feelings of security and safety. These are all psychological reasons for why we eat or don't eat, why we do what we do. So it's really all about finding that identity and that groundedness for your child, first as a person and then as an athlete. So.
I'm waiting for that pro athlete that starts being a spokesperson for macaroni and cheese out of a box, so start eating that. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is more soccer specific, and Amy, you mentioned it at the beginning, but overtraining. It's something that's talked about often. And granted, you have a baseline, your nutrition, your sleep, and everything. Are there any day-to-day signs that you can see from the adolescents, specifically the adolescents, that we can tell, we can note, hey, maybe you should take, a few days or whatever the case may be.
Probably I'm not the best person to overtrain. I'm going to see more legs lines, so maybe more acutely.
Some of the things you'll likely see, a lot of times you'll see just their attitude change about the particular sport or practice or whatever. They're a little bit more angry, quick to pop off, I guess. You'll see that. You'll see the performance start dropping. They'll be chronically fatigued. You'll probably see maybe chronically sick a lot, can't get healthy, just always feeling sluggish. Are some of the things that you'll typically see as far as a quick visual sign for overtraining. There's some other medically things that you can look at, like heart rate and stuff like that. That generally starts to rise or something as overtraining starts creeping in. But those are probably some of the quicker couple, 3 or 4 things you can look at.
And is there something that you strongly recommend, if the kid is passionate about a sport, would you strongly recommend, hey, you need X amount of weeks off throughout the year? Is there anything of that nature? Or
definitely you can sit them. I'll see this a lot, as they were alluded to earlier with the distance runners. You'll see a lot of overtraining or overreaching to where they start to get to that point. They'll also get some pains, whether it's in the bones or feet or legs or whatever. But it could be a sitting thing, or it could be, hey, because a lot of this can happen, but maybe they're eating well, but maybe they're not eating well enough or enough to combat the overtraining or overreaching. So it could be sitting, but it also could be, hey, let's look at the nutrition piece and see if we can get that dialed in. Because generally, after the overreaching comes the overtraining, which leads to the hormonal issues first and foremost, and then the bone injuries. You'll see a lot of stress fractures and stuff like that, and these individuals are sharp bone pains or pains in general that they just can't find a way to get rid of.
And it's definitely going to depend on, I guess, the extent or how long that individual has been overtrained. So overreaching, a lot of times, like he said, nutritionally, you can actually turn it around if you can identify something in the diet, or maybe carbohydrate intake is low. So this, your glycogen stores or your carbohydrate stores within your muscles, that's what you're using when you're exercising. So a lot of times with glycogen depletion, it's something that athletes they're just chronically running on empty, and then they're in that overreaching stage, and before it really becomes this serious overtraining syndrome, that can be corrected with, say, glycogen loading, more carbohydrates, eating more total calories. But what I wanted to add on what Brandon said, in the symptoms, when it gets to a certain point where it may really be going in a bad direction, sleep disruptions are going to be really common. So if you want to ask your athletes or really look at sleep, like, are you sleeping okay? Has anything changed? Because that's going to be a point when it starts to probably get a little bit serious. And then that may be progressing to the point where hormonal imbalance is coming into play. So that's a good one to look out for.
And this may be over